Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa. I'm Rochelle Harrison-Pless. Good to have you with us. Coming up. Boys as young as 12 recruited as child soldiers in South Sudan. A new report by UNICEF says more than 650 children are being trained to kill. A recruitment drive that sparked fears of a return to civil war. A decade on from the toxic waste dump in Ivory Coast, victims are still waiting for compensation and justice. 17 people died and tens of thousands of others were poisoned in what was the country's worst ever health and environmental disaster. And it's hot, spicy and tickles your taste buds. We're on the hunt for Tunisia's tastiest harissa. But first, the forced recruitment of child soldiers in South Sudan has skyrocketed. That's according to a new report by UNICEF. Armed groups have drafted more than 650 children, some as young as 12, since the start of the year. The shocking revelations intensify fears of renewed civil war. Just last month, a fresh round of deadly violence broke out in the capital, Juba, despite a nearly one-year-old peace deal. Charles Pelgrim has more.
From battlefield to classroom. When Salva Kiir and Riek Machar signed a peace deal a year ago, this former child soldier found his way back to school. But the recent escalation of violence in the country has pushed UNICEF to ring the alarm on the plight of South Sudanese child soldiers.
We fear that a further spike in child recruitment could be imminent.
Since the beginning of the civil war in 2013, over 16,000 minors have been recruited. For 2016, this number is now 650. For the UN agency, both sides are responsible and have to be held accountable for their actions.
The systematic use of rape, sexual exploitation and abduction as a weapon of war in South Sudan must cease, together with the impunity of all perpetrators.
During the fragile truce, over 1,700 boys were freed from armed groups and received assistance partly from UNICEF. Many of them will still be bearing the scars of their years as forced soldiers.
And the violence that they're forced to commit and the atrocities that they become part of, including being forced to rape, to shoot, is just appalling. And it takes years for these children to overcome these horrors.
Unfortunately, most of them will have trouble finding help. Close to 13,000 South Sudanese children are said to be missing.
Next, it's been 10 years since the toxic waste dump in Ivory Coast, the worst environmental disaster the country has ever seen. In August 2006, a cargo ship offloaded dangerous chemical waste across several sites in the port city of Abidjan. It sparked a massive health crisis which killed 17 people and poisoned tens of thousands of others. Despite lengthy international legal battles and allegations of a cover-up, a decade on, victims are still waiting for compensation.
This is Akouedi Dump in Abidjan. It's just a few hundred metres to the closest houses. This is where, in 2006, the first batch of toxic waste was left. Yolandi can still remember the smell from that day.
Une odeur suffocante, piquante, très forte.
The smell was suffocating, pungent, really strong. It made me dizzy. We didn't know what was happening. We went outside. What was that strong smell, we asked? The tingling, the vomiting. We started to be sick.
Within just a few hours, nearly everyone living here fell sick. 17 people died, and there were more than 43,000 cases of poisoning. The previous day, Probo Koala had arrived in Abidjan port. Its tanks were full of hazardous waste. An Ivorian company emptied the ship at a slashed price and with no precautions. The material was dumped in 18 sites. Now the waste has been removed, but Edouard thinks the poisonous aftermath is still there.
When it rains, you can still smell the toxic waste is here. That means that the plants are contaminated. And all these products are sold in the market.
Many victims still bear the scars of the disaster. For them, it wasn't a case of simple negligence. They believe the shipping company, the Dutch-based Trafigura, is responsible.
The story can be summed up in a few lines. It's because a powerful multinational decided to make Ivory Coast their dumping ground in order to save a few thousand euros. They chose to do something illegal rather than pay their money.
The ship's owner rejects all responsibility. 10 years on, and many thousands of victims are still hoping for some compensation.
That report from Anna Sylvester Trenner and Arnaud Froger. Right, a quick look at some other stories we're following across the continent. A car packed with explosives blew up after a high-speed car chase through the Somali capital late Thursday. One person was killed and at least 4 others wounded. Security forces were chasing the car, but the drivers escaped and abandoned the vehicle before the bomb went off. The blast rocked a busy intersection in eastern Mogadishu and sparked a blaze at a nearby petrol station. Authorities in Mali have released the popular activist and radio presenter known as Ras Bat. His arrest sent his supporters into the streets of Bamako earlier this week, sparking violent protests that left 1 person dead and several others injured. The radio show host, whose real name is Mohamed Youssouf Batili, is a vocal critic of the Malian government. And an historic vote in South Africa. Pretoria has elected its first ever opposition mayor, 36-year-old Solly Msimanga from the centre-right Democratic Alliance. It's the first time the ruling ANC party has lost control of the country's capital since the end of apartheid more than 20 years ago. The DA party swept a victory in Pretoria during local elections earlier this month. Now, the Rio Games are winding down, but not before another couple of days of sporting action, with the men's marathon wrapping up the athletics competition this Sunday. In the starting blocks, 33-year-old Wesley Korir, a Kenyan runner, as well as a serving Member of Parliament. Our sports editor Ketavan Gorjestani has more on the politician chasing gold in Rio.
When the men's marathon kicks off this Sunday, Kenyan runners will once again be on the front line, but one of them will be standing out, Wesley Korir. Like many Kenyan runners, he comes from a poor family near the town of Iten, and he started running as a child to cover the miles between his family's farm and his school. He then went on to perform and become a professional marathon runner. But among the Kenyan runners that will be taking part in that race on Sunday, he will be the only one who is also a sitting member of the Kenyan Parliament. Korir, who after winning the marathons of LA and Boston in 2012, used his prize money to run for office and win as an independent, as a politician. He's been very vocal about an issue close to his heart, the doping crisis in his country. And he said that there are a lot of problems and that he wants to help fix them, especially in Kenyan athletics. Korir says that a medal on Sunday would be a bonus, but the real goal is to clear the name of Kenyan athletes and to prove that they are indeed clean. After the Olympics, though, Korir will not stop running. He will run, but this time he will run for re-election.
Al Ketavan Gorjestani reporting from Rio de Janeiro. And finally, it's a staple in Tunisian kitchens, but one that could make your eyes water. Harissa, a spicy chili pepper paste, adds a kick to every meal. Used in stews, soups and couscous, it's been dubbed Tunisia's national condiment. Our correspondents Sandro Lutiens and Hamdi Talili take you on a tasting tour that certainly packs a punch.
It's rush hour in the kitchen of this high-end Tunis restaurant. Head chef Mounir Aram and his team are boiling, chopping and stirring to keep up with orders. All quality dishes and typically Tunisian.
So here we're preparing an octopus kamounia. It's a stew from the region of Sfax.
And no matter the hurry, there's always time for the crucial final touch.
We're going to add harissa. We add it to all our sauces. We don't eat it if it's not spicy. It's tasteless. In Tunisia, we eat very hot and very spicy.
Harissa finds its way onto the plate of just about every Tunisian dish. And it all starts here, the plains of the Cap Bon region. It's now in mid-July that the workers start to harvest the red chili peppers, a moment that harissa producer Ahmed Artig makes sure he never misses.
This is a very high-quality chili pepper. They're peppers of a specific type, and that allows us to produce a very, very high-quality harissa.
The next stage is called cording. The workers weave garlands of peppers and then hang them up outside in the sun. Once dried, the peppers are minced together with garlic and salt. For this bit, when done traditionally, it's all about the wrist.
Now it's also about revisiting harissa. We work with set doses when we flavor classic harissa, with cumin, for example, and we add slightly different amounts of ginger or thyme or rosemary.
Experimenting with new recipes, I met hopes to highlight the endless varieties of harissa made in Tunisia. Next up, he wants to get a guaranteed origin label for harissa and then get harissa recognized by UNESCO as an integral part of Tunisia's cultural heritage.
Looks delicious. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Eye on Africa. Stay tuned to France 24. Live from Paris continues in just a few moments.
The 51%, presented by Annette Young.
Hello, I'm Annette Young, the host of The 51%. Now, can you name 3 famous women painters? I suspect, like me, that you're probably finding it a struggle, which is why in this special edition we're focusing on women in art and asking if indeed the push for gender equality has reached the art world.
The 51% on France 24 and France24.com.